In the previous video, we talked about creating your organizational structure. By that, we mean the locations that your business is operating in and also the positions that are employed in those various locations. Locations we call work sites. What that enabled us to do was it enabled us to start to construct a reporting relationship org chart as we see here. And you recall the reason that the positions were important is because the workflow is predicated on positions. When we assign a task in our workflow, and we're going to cover workflow in detail shortly, but when we assign a task in workflow, it is assigned to a position, and then the system looks to see who is employed in that position and then assigns the task to that individual. And that's important, remember, because if somebody leaves the business or changes the position they're working in the business, we don't want the workflow to be compromised. So that's the workflow role. There are two other concepts that we want to talk about. Is the role. Now this is not the position, this is different. This is the role that this person is partaking in the solution role, not the employment role. And then the other option we want to talk about is the access control list. In other words, which users when they log in can see which other members in the business. So me, I'm John Buttons here. I'm logged into the system and I can see these 3 employee members. If I hit my structure, the reason I can see them is because they reside beneath me in the organizational relationship. When Jenny logs in, Jenny doesn't get access to John Button. Jenny can't see John, can't see his personal profile, can't assign tasks to him because Jenny is reporting to John. Jenny can't see Edward because Edward is her peer, but she can see Amanda. And I'll demonstrate that by using another feature that we have called mirroring. Because Jenny reports to me, I can mirror Jenny, which means that I can view the solution through her eyes. So I'm click mirror, it loads up, so I am now logged in as Jenny. Now Jenny is, remember in the organizational chart, Jenny had Amanda reporting to her, hence she can only see Amanda. That means that Jenny can manage Amanda's profile, can view her profile, and can take any actions that she wants to. So now she's viewing her direct reports profile. When she looks at the organizational relationships in terms of the structure, Jenny can see Amanda. So there is the concept of the access control list. Now the second thing I want to talk about is the role. So you recall that Jenny had the role, and I'll show it in a moment if you don't recall, but Jenny is a manager role. The manager role, in other words the solution role, determines which functions Jenny has access to in the left-hand menu. Essentially, Jenny as a manager, has access to all the functions and can view all those functions, can only see those functions in the context of the employees that relate to her, where it's an employee-centric function, and can also access personal settings. But the personal settings is where her constraint is set. A manager cannot modify the settings of the solution. They can only maintain their personal settings. So that's the concept of the role. So I'll go back and go back as my original user and demonstrate, for example, when I mirror the employee roles, what we see differently. So here, I'm going to now mirror Edward Paul. I'm looking at Edward Paul's profile. Now, as you can see, Edward as a employee role, recruiter role, has access to functions here, but no longer has access to the finance menu that the manager did. Does not have access to the organizational structure because, of course, Edward doesn't have anybody reporting to them and therefore doesn't need access to other employee members. So it's an example of the functions changing according to the role that we've assigned Edward. So let's just do a bit of a recap. When a person logs into the system, it looks at the position of that person in the organizational chart, and it determines which employee records they have access to. That is called the access control list. and that is controlled by the position you hold within the organizational relationship. The second is the roles, and that is the roles that a person has in the solution. The manager role has access to all the functions, but doesn't have access to settings. Admin, of course, is a bit like God, can access everything within the solution. A recruiter as a role, if they don't have anybody reporting to them, doesn't have access to the organizational menu function, and doesn't have access to the finance function, which is where the payroll and invoicing takes place. If you want to change roles, you can do, but only if you are the administrator. So if Edward Poole we now wanted to give manager access to, we would come in here and we would add Edward Poole as a manager. Now note that Edward is still a recruiter. We didn't need to remove him from the recruiter role. What is important is that he will get the greater rights. So when he logs on, he will get the manager rights because that has more rights than the recruiter. So there's no harm if you forget to remove them from another role. Right? So that's an example where you don't need to assign them the employee role because a manager has greater rights than an employee. Likewise, a recruiter has greater rights. And you can see here that we have roles for candidates. So when a candidate logs into the system, applies for a job, they are assigned the candidate role. Then when they log in, they don't get access to any of these functions. They only get access to their personal employee profile. And in a subsequent video, we're going to talk about the agent, client, employee. This is employees of your clients. So when you assign a agent, client, employee role to a contact within your business, then they can log in and they can view the jobs and the timesheets and the rosters of the candidates that you've put on jobs that you're providing to that client. So we'll deal with that a lot more in detail when we get into job management. But that's the concept of roles. So access control list determines who you see. Who you see is determined by where you sit in the organizational chart. And we're going to create appointments for our employees in the next video, which will further support what I'm saying. And then there is the role, the solution role, which determines which functions the user has access to. Thank you very much.